There's a certain misty-eyed fondness in the electrical industry for incandescent lighting, and with good reason. For decades it was literally the only option for illuminating homes. Plus it gave off a light that was both steady and warm, both in its colour temperature and, quite literally, as they were so inefficient, they were technically like little heaters that gave off a little bit of waste light. Compact fluorescent lights were certainly more efficient, but could never quite match the cosy domesticity of, say, tungsten halogen. But then came the LED. Admittedly not great in the early days of domestic adoption, a cluster of signalling LEDs was about the best you could hope for, with the washed out, underlit results that you might expect. But development was fast, and the race to emulate tungsten halogen was on. The first step was to make the fitting look like it contained a traditional lamp rather than an industrial control panel. And that's pretty much been achieved in these F-type fittings from Luceco Lighting now. A casual glance wouldn't make this jump out as being much different from an old GU10 lamp. The next step manufacturers needed to do was to boost light outputs, so they matched the old 35 or 50 watt lamps. This took a whole ream of developments, mostly in the quality, power and heat dissipation of the individual LEDs that were now sitting clumped in a relatively small area. Once LED technology had moved along far enough, the next challenge was a biggie, and one that is constantly thrown up in the electrical community: the issue of cost. LED lighting used to be not prohibitively expensive, but it wasn't the cheapest option. As is generally the case with tech though, widespread uptake leads to a decrease in costs, and this was the case with LED lighting, to the point where LED downlights are now comparable in cost to a standalone fitting and lamp. Now the final challenge was in connection with dimming. When you dim an incandescent lamp, the current flowing through the filament was almost infinitely adjustable and would glow rather beautifully, giving a lovely, cosy atmosphere. Dimming LED lighting was notoriously difficult for a long time, with all sorts of issues being caused, and even when it worked well, it never quite gave the same effect as dimming a tungsten halogen lamp. I think this was for two reasons. The first is that people were often just adjusting the light output of the main light in the room in an attempt to create coziness. I don't believe they were achieving this. In reality, you'd get a better effect by turning the main light off and putting on a couple of wall lights or standard lamps. The second is that dimming LED lighting did just that. It turned down the light output of the source, and this made rooms simply feel underlit. After all, there's a fine line between dim and gloomy. So what was the solution? Well, it's the dim to warm effect that has been incorporated as standard into the Mark II and Ultra versions of the F-type fittings from Luceco Lighting. And it gives you the perfect opportunity to upsell your customers from the entry-level Essence fitting. There's a couple of variants of the fitting, and it's these versions with the switches giving the option to switch between warm white and cool white that feature the dim to warm function. Setting the switch to WW for warm white enables the fitting to operate in dim to warm mode. It's interesting that Luceco Lighting were the first to incorporate this dim to warm effect into a fire-rated downlight in 2017, but it was an idea that was a little bit ahead of its time. However, with all the progressions that we've discussed, it seems that its time has finally come. So what does it do? Well, as you dim the fitting down, the light level reduces, as you'd expect it to. However, as the light output goes down, the electronic driver in the back of the fitting doesn't just dim the light, it also changes the colour temperature of the light output. And this means that the quality of the light, as well as the amount of it, changes and creates that cosy, warm feeling that you want to create as you settle down for a quiet evening with your loved ones and a movie or a good book. The almost open fire and candles glow that we associate with rest, relaxation and comfort. We've seen LED lighting come a long way since those early days of ugly and inappropriately applied LED light sources, and now features like dim to warm have cleared away the last barriers that might cause objection to its uptake. So it seems it's finally time to thank incandescent lighting for its service and bid it a fond farewell, because the LED revolution is simply irresistible. So that's the standout feature of these F-type fittings for the end user. To find out what I think is the absolute best feature for installing electricians, check out these videos on screen now, and don't forget to click on the links to access our free training made in association with the Luceco Group. All that remains in this video is to say thank you very much for watching.